They remind us we're all one big family, sharing a collective experience.
He's been the face of one of Hollywood's biggest, loudest, and most profitable franchises for over 2 decades. But behind the muscle cars and loyalty speeches, Vin Diesel has been quietly keeping score. And now, he's naming names. Not just rivals, not just co-stars, enemies. The kind that triggered silent grudges, shattered friendships, and off-camera drama more intense than any street race. From subtle sabotage to outright betrayal, these are 5 actors who pushed too far and paid the price. One became the villain on screen. Another never even got the chance. What really happened behind the scenes? Jason Momoa. When Fast and Furious 10 rolled into production, Vin Diesel thought he had found the perfect villain. Enter Jason Momoa, larger than life, charismatic, unpredictable. The kind of actor who could inject new energy into a franchise that had already spanned decades. Diesel personally endorsed Momoa's casting, believing his flair and physicality would complement the Fast universe. What Diesel didn't expect? That Momoa would end up stealing the entire movie out from under him. Momoa's portrayal of Dante Reyes, the flamboyant, sadistic villain bent on revenge, became Fast and Furious 10's breakout performance. Critics raved, fans flooded social media, and memes exploded. For many, Momoa was the only reason to watch the film. He wasn't just the bad guy, he was the star. That praise didn't sit well with Diesel, who had spent years building the franchise on his shoulders, both as its lead actor and one of its lead producers. Sources from the production told Radar Online that Diesel was reportedly irritated by Momoa's improvisational style. Unlike Diesel's brooding, stoic Dominic Toretto, Momoa's Dante was chaotic and loud, a complete contrast. Diesel felt the over-the-top energy distracted from the tone of the film, and even blamed it for some of the negative reception. The irony? Critics and audiences loved that exact unpredictability. It was Momoa's risk-taking that gave the film its pulse. And while Diesel didn't call out Momoa publicly, the whispers got loud. Reports emerged that Diesel believed Momoa had overacted and even accused him, behind closed doors, of ruining the movie. According to Wyon's coverage in 2023, Momoa responded with grace. He posted a heartfelt message on Instagram thanking Diesel and the Fast crew, calling the experience amazing. But if you read between the lines, that post felt more like damage control than genuine warmth. It wasn't just about screen time or performance. Diesel's entire identity had become intertwined with Fast and Furious. He had led the franchise since 2001, becoming a self-styled custodian of its legacy. So, when a newcomer like Momoa walked in and became the focal point of conversations, even being called the best Fast villain ever, it touched a nerve. The set, according to insiders, became tense, with Diesel keeping a tighter grip on control. Momoa, ever the professional, played along in public. He smiled during press tours and avoided any jabs. But the shift was obvious. When promotional duties ramped up for Fast and Furious 10, Diesel and Momoa were rarely seen together. Group interviews became solo spots. Diesel leaned into promoting the family aspect, while Momoa talked about Dante like it was a separate project entirely. For 2 stars sharing the screen, their off-screen chemistry was non-existent. Dramatically, within a few months after the Fast and Furious 10 premiere, speculation started making rounds as rumors circulated that perhaps Momoa would not reprise his role for the sequel. This disconcerted many fans, especially since it was Dante's cliffhanger ending. However, when updates about Fast 11 started to come out, news including Momoa's name was absent. Insiders claimed it was a creative decision. Industry watchers, however, saw it for what it was: pure exile. Interestingly, Universal did not distance itself from Momoa. In fact, execs over at the studio were pleased with the character's reception. Diesel, who remains deeply influential behind the scenes, was probably the final offerer, though. After all, egos, as much as talents, drive decisions in this industry, and Momoa becomes collateral damage in Diesel's continuing bid to protect his franchise dominance. But, all in all, Momoa came out of it without too many bruises from Fast and Furious 10. If anything, it really took him beyond being just Aquaman or some sword-swinging warrior icon. Momoa proved he was capable of being that loud, unhinged, and theatrical. Maybe it didn't score him apart in the next Fast, but it opened other doors. And Diesel? The man still drives the franchise on. Here is an intriguing, sad reminder from the Jason Momoa saga. Even within what is clearly a billion-dollar franchise dependent, above all on loyalty and quite a bit on family, the stakes of a rivalry can run far under the radar until the cameras stop rolling and the power games begin. What added to the fallout was how fan campaigns came into conflict with franchise politics. After Fast and Furious 10, audiences clamored to bring back Momoa's Dante, with petitions, edits, and theories all over social media, asking Universal to put him back in Fast 11. And yet, the studio gave no updates, even with that demand. The one character who really saw this franchise recommissioned disappeared. Déjà vu for the senior fans. Another star has outshone Diesel and is suddenly evaporating from view. As for the newcomers watching the drama, quite simple. Here, there can only be one driver in the limelight, irrespective of the talent. But if you thought the tension with Momoa was heated, wait until you hear about the star Diesel didn't even let through the door. Keanu Reeves. When fans heard Keanu Reeves might be joining the Fast and Furious universe, the internet exploded. The idea of the John Wick star entering Diesel's nitro-fueled world was a dream crossover. It wasn't just buzz. Reeves was reportedly approached multiple times to appear, even as far back as Hobbs and Shaw. But somehow, every time, the deal mysteriously fell through. The official story? Scheduling conflicts. The real story? That's where things get interesting. According to a 2023 Radar Online report, Vin Diesel saw Keanu Reeves not as an ally, but as a threat. The Fast franchise has always been Diesel's turf, a domain where he's more than just the star. He's the producer, the decision-maker, the captain of the ship. So when talk of Reeves potentially being cast in a major role started circulating, Diesel reportedly became icy. He didn't want another strong, fan-favorite actor stepping into his spotlight. The feud didn't come from any personal incident between the two men. In fact, they've barely interacted in public. But for Diesel, Reeves represented something deeper, a kind of quiet competition. Keanu wasn't loud, didn't dominate press junkets, didn't flex ego. He just showed up, did the work, and let the audience love him. And love him they did. While Diesel had to fight for every inch of credibility, Reeves seemed to earn it effortlessly. That difference in image reportedly fueled resentment. Diesel had crafted his brand around intensity, loyalty, and raw power. But Reeves, he was effortlessly cool. While Diesel pushed the family narrative in every interview, Keanu quietly dominated John Wick, a franchise just as action-packed. And some would argue, smarter and more grounded. The media noticed, too, often comparing the two when discussing the evolution of action cinema. It didn't help that when Reeves was floated for Hobbs and Shaw, he was supposedly considered for the mysterious voice of the villain, Etion. The role was eventually dropped, but sources said Diesel was not pleased about the casting discussions happening without his approval. Diesel didn't just want creative control. He wanted to own the franchise's identity. Reeves stepping in, even as a villain, could have unbalanced that structure. Behind the scenes, Diesel reportedly told Universal executives that Reeves didn't fit the tone. But that excuse rang hollow. After all, the Fast series had already welcomed everyone from Charlize Theron to Helen Mirren. The real reason? Diesel didn't want to be outshined. Not by another bald-headed action icon who could draw millions with a whisper and a head tilt. Reeves, for his part, never said anything about the situation. He was known for staying above the drama, and insiders say he was gracious, even when the talks went south. The pattern remained. After 3 separate tries to put him in the Fast universe, he left, and the doors stayed closed. No cameos, no post-credit teases, and not one word said about him in the extended lore. It speaks volumes that while other big stars like Dwayne Johnson, Jason Statham, and even John Cena jockeyed for position within the Fast saga, Reeves never got a look in. And it wasn't due to a lack of fit. Diesel wouldn't let him. In a franchise all about brotherhood and second chances, Reeves is the one guy who was left parked in the garage. The irony is that the rivalry never needed to exist. Reeves never had any designs for it. But in Hollywood, it really is a matter of perception. Diesel, always guarding his throne, saw Reeves as someone who could quietly take it without ever needing to raise his voice. At the end of the day, screen time and contracts were far from being the issue. It was the pride of a very proud action icon considering his own image against one entirely different from his own. One loud, one silent. And in those realms with engines roaring and egos clashing, Keanu Reeves was the one person Diesel would not let into the family. Not because he didn't fit, but because he fit too much. This made the absence all the more glaring in that Reeves dovetails so well into the evolving Fast and Furious formula. The storyline focused not just on outside locations, but also on underground warfare and high-tech villains, and brought forth everything about what one could expect from a character who had a Matrix and John Wick pedigree. The fans did not just want to imagine it, they expected it. Even insiders within the franchise were highlighting things, for example, pairing Dom with Wick-like characters in the speculation fueling every sequel. Yet somehow, he remained the ghost of what might have been a megastar, ticking every single box, but kept at an arm's distance. Not because the part wasn't there, but because the light had already had an owner. Tyrese Gibson. When the Fast and Furious franchise talks about family, Tyrese Gibson was always one of the loudest voices echoing that message. From his debut in Too Fast, Too Furious, his character Roman Pierce brought comic relief, chaos, and chemistry to the team. And off-screen, Tyrese seemed just as committed. But behind the brotherhood, a quieter tension was building, one that eventually put him and Vin Diesel on opposite sides of the family table. The drama really ignited during the fallout between Vin Diesel and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. When Johnson signed on for Hobbs and Shaw, a spin-off that delayed Fast 9, Tyrese didn't hold back. He publicly blasted Johnson, accusing him of being selfish and breaking up the team. But what really raised eyebrows? Vin Diesel, the supposed leader of the franchise, didn't back Tyrese up. In fact, he stayed silent. And in Hollywood, silence can be louder than words. Tyrese saw it as a betrayal. He had gone to war for the family brand, attacking Johnson to protect what Diesel had built. But Diesel never returned the favor. Instead, reports surfaced that Diesel had secretly supported Hobbs and Shaw, even helping the studio push it forward. Tyrese had been fighting a battle Vin had no intention of joining. That realization cut deep. Publicly, Diesel tried to keep the peace. In interviews, he dodged the drama, focusing on unity and the greater good. But behind the scenes, the energy had shifted. Tyrese started posting cryptic Instagram messages about disloyalty, fake friends, and being left out. He never named Diesel directly, but fans could connect the dots. The Brotherhood was cracking. Things only got worse when Fast 9 went into production. Tyrese returned, but his role felt diminished. Less screen time and fewer character moments. Insiders claimed it wasn't by accident. Diesel, who holds producing power, was said to be scaling back certain characters to tighten control over the narrative. And Roman, once a key part of the core team, started feeling like comic relief again, not a core player. Tyrese didn't take it lightly. During the press tour for F9, he gave stiff, awkward interviews. The chemistry between him and Diesel, once effortless, felt forced. While Diesel spoke in grand terms about legacy and leadership, Tyrese kept his comments brief. The tension wasn't front-page news, but fans watching closely saw the distance growing. Next came Fast and Furious 10, when the media landscape was abuzz with reports of newcomers like Jason Momoa. Tyrese, however, took the low road during promotions. No sincere Instagram declarations. No videos with Diesel referring to family. And again, screen time? Decreased. Character arc? Non-existent. Roman was simply there. Present, yet not insignificance. Insiders told Radar Online that Tyrese was, in fact, upset. The feeling was one of being overlooked, undervalued, and, most painful of all, like a disposable object. When he used to belong to the troupe defending the franchise tooth and nail, this change must have felt like a slap in the face. Even rumors began to swirl that he might not be in Fast 11 at all, but that has yet to be confirmed. Diesel never attacked Tyrese directly, in spite of the personal tension between them. He hinted and he shaded, but he never said Vin's name. That self-restraint speaks volumes. The respect was clearly still there, or at least it used to be. But the friendship? That might just be permanently broken. Diesel has chosen to ignore Tyrese's public grievances and instead forge ahead with his plans for the series the way he wants, with or without old friends. The Tyrese Gibson-Vin Diesel feud is not loud. It's not built upon insults or face-offs. It is built upon silence, distance, and the miasma of unreciprocated loyalty. For a franchise that is all about family, this fracture provides a reminder of how sometimes the loudest betrayals are those that remain unvoiced. What stings even more for Tyrese is the change in the tone of the franchise now, from ensemble camaraderie to what many perceive as Diesel's solo legacies tour. In the earlier films, Roman Pierce was not just comic relief, but a fan favorite, a spark of personality in a testosterone-fueled lineup. Now the narrow direction is around Dom Toretto's mythology, leaving Tyrese's screen presence in the background. Privately, sources say Tyrese felt that he had really struggled in his mind with disloyalty to a franchise and a friend taking him for a background player. And for someone who preached family louder than most, that silence hits differently. Just when you thought things couldn't get more personal, an even deeper fracture was quietly forming behind the scenes. Paul Walker's brothers. After Paul Walker's tragic death in 2013, the Fast and Furious franchise was never the same. Paul wasn't just a co-star, he was Vin Diesel's closest friend, on and off screen. Diesel even called Paul his brother. So when it came time to finish Furious 7, the studio made a delicate decision. Paul's brothers, Cody and Caleb Walker, would serve as stand-ins to complete his scenes, aided by CGI. It was a tribute, one Diesel publicly supported. But behind the scenes, that decision planted the seeds for a complicated relationship. At first, it looked like a shared mission. The Walker family wanted to honor Paul's legacy, and Diesel wanted to finish the film without erasing Paul's presence. Furious 7 ended with a tear-jerking farewell, a final ride that fans still talk about today. It was emotional, respectful, and beautifully done. But after that, things got murkier. The Walker brothers began appearing at fast events, giving interviews, and even hinting at returning to the franchise. That's when the quiet tension started to rise. Cody Walker, in particular, stepped into a more public role. He launched a charity in Paul's name, gave interviews about Paul's legacy, and became a kind of unofficial spokesperson for his late brother. In 2021, Cody said he'd be open to rejoining the franchise if it meant honoring Paul the right way. Fans were intrigued. Was Brian O'Connor going to return in some form? But Vin Diesel wasn't as enthusiastic. Diesel has always been fiercely protective of Paul's memory. He named his daughter Pauline in his honor, and he regularly posts tributes on Paul's birthday or the anniversary of his death. But sources say Diesel also views Paul's character, Brian, as sacred, untouchable. And having Paul's brothers reappear, especially if it felt like a replacement, crossed a line for him. According to insiders, Diesel believed the farewell in Furious 7 should have been the end of Brian's story. Things reached a quiet breaking point during the production of F9. Fans noticed Paul's character was barely mentioned. No flashbacks, no voiceovers, no CGI cameo. It was as if Brian had disappeared from the family, even though the last we saw, he was still alive in the universe. When asked why, Diesel gave vague answers about respecting Paul's legacy. But some insiders said the omission was intentional, part of an effort to avoid further involvement from Cody and Caleb. Meanwhile, Cody continued his work with Reach Out Worldwide, the charity Paul started. He also stayed active in fan circles, attending conventions and interacting with die-hard fast followers, but noticeably absent from his social media posts. Diesel, the man who once called himself Paul's brother, was no longer showing up in Cody's tributes or photos. For fans paying attention, the divide was becoming obvious. The 2023 gossip mill falsely whispered that Cody was talking about potentially appearing in Fast 11, maybe in a flashback. That rumor was said to have been nipped in the bud by Diesel, not out of spite, but out of control. He regards himself as the steward of Paul's image in the franchise, and he was unwilling to share that even with the real-life family of Paul. The studio executives did not contest. Diesel was just too strong for that. There is no public record of beefing between Diesel and the Walker brothers, no interviews, and no angry posts. But sometimes being silent says a lot more. Since Furious 7, the Walker brothers have been completely erased from the Fast project. No producing credits, no story involvement, no cameos. And for two men who helped to finish a movie during one of Hollywood's most emotional bereavements, the silence speaks volumes. It is indeed a tragic circumstance. Diesel loved Paul unquestionably, but in trying to protect Paul's legacy, he may have wound up shunning those who might have helped keep it alive. Cody and Caleb were not trying to replace their brother. They simply were trying to honor him. Instead of being embraced, they were quietly marginalized. In the end, Diesel's relationship with Paul Walker's brothers is one colored by love, loss, and control. Animosity was never an option. Diesel's effort to protect a legacy may have inadvertently estranged the very family that Paul left behind. And that just might be the most painful contradiction of all in a franchise built on the word family. The tension heightened when the fan campaigns began emerging on social media to bring Cody Walker to Fast 11, not as a replacement for Paul, but as a symbolic torchbearer. Hashtags like #BringBackBrian and #WalkerLegacy momentarily caught fire, sharpening an almost whispered fissure in the fandom. Some felt Diesel was right to preserve the honor of the end of Furious 7. Others saw it as gatekeeping. The Walker brothers remained respectful, if at a distance, making no direct criticism of Diesel. Yet their refusal to work on a project together, despite all the fan support, spoke volumes. By that measure, it seemed, the brotherhood ended with Paul. In the end, the truth about Vin Diesel and Paul Walker's brothers is about two non-coexisting accounts of a legacy, instead of being about betrayal or conflict. To Diesel, preserving Paul's memory meant keeping it frozen in time, untouched, unchallenged, and shielded from reinterpretation in any real-world context. But to Cody and Caleb, honoring Paul was about keeping that spirit alive through continued participation. There was no malevolence involved on either side. Somewhere between preservation and participation, something gave way. In the very same franchise that formed its identity on loyalty, family, and never leaving anyone behind, the silence of this estrangement echoes loudly that even close families can slip away when ownership of grief rears its ugly head. Yet not all of Diesel's conflicts were quiet. Some exploded into public view, with one name leading the charge: Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. When Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson joined the Fast and Furious franchise in Fast 5, it felt like a shot of adrenaline. The franchise, already a global powerhouse, found new life with Johnson's character, Luke Hobbs, a no-nonsense federal agent with enough muscle and swagger to go toe-to-toe with Dominic Toretto. At first, Vin Diesel welcomed the energy. On-screen, the tension was electric. Off-screen, it started to get personal, fast. By the time The Fate of the Furious was filming, cracks began to show. Johnson, known for his discipline and professionalism, reportedly grew frustrated with Diesel's work habits, including frequent lateness, creative indecision, and a controlling attitude on set. It all came to a head when Johnson posted a now infamous Instagram post in 2016, calling out unnamed male co-stars as candy asses who couldn't conduct themselves professionally. Everyone knew who he meant. Behind the scenes, things escalated. Johnson and Diesel reportedly stopped filming scenes together entirely. Through the editing room magic, their characters appeared to interact, but they were never on set at the same time. Crew members confirmed the two actors had to be kept separate due to rising tensions. It wasn't just a disagreement, it was a full-blown Cold War. The feud split the franchise in two. When Johnson teamed up with Jason Statham for Hobbs and Shaw, it wasn't just a spin-off, it was an exit strategy. Johnson walked away from the mainline Fast films, citing creative differences and a desire to protect the positive energy on his sets. Diesel, meanwhile, made cryptic comments in interviews about tough love and leadership, claiming he was simply pushing Johnson to deliver his best. But Johnson wasn't buying it. In a 2021 Vanity Fair interview, he said he laughed hard when Diesel claimed the feud was part of his method to improve Johnson's acting. Johnson said he'd never return to the franchise, adding, "I wish them well, I wish them luck, but I have no plans to return." It was a firm, final line in the sand. For the fans, it was disappointing. For Diesel, it was a public slap in the face. Then, in late 2021, Diesel posted an Instagram plea, publicly asking Johnson to come back for Fast 10. He referenced Paul Walker's legacy, his own children calling Johnson Uncle Dwayne, and claimed the world needed Hobbs to return. On the surface, it seemed heartfelt, But Johnson didn't see it that way. In an interview with CNN, he called the post manipulative and said he had already privately told Diesel he wouldn't return. For him, the matter was closed. To everyone's surprise, though, Johnson made his return, albeit briefly, as part of a Fast and Furious 10 post-credit twist nobody saw coming. In a surprise cameo, he appeared as Hobbs, setting the stage for his return in a Hobbs-specific spin-off before the release of Fast 11. Fans were astonished. Were they back together? Not really. He shot the scene independently of Diesel, so neither set of stars ever crossed paths. Their rage was still alive, even in reunion, according to sources from the industry. They believe that the return is nothing short of a business arrangement. Universal wanted the star power of Johnson back to revitalize its dream franchise that has taken a critical beating in the wake of F9. Johnson, the branding strategist, used it to reorient, not back into Fast, but into his own lane within that same universe. It was less about making peace and more about reclaiming control of his corner of the franchise. Diesel never spoke of the cameo. No posts, no words, nothing. But it was all understood. The door he once claimed was ajar had now become a side door that he no longer commanded. Hobbs was back, but on his terms. And Diesel was, for the very first time in the history of the franchise, no longer the center of the push. The feud between Vin Diesel and Dwayne Johnson is now about legacies instead of petty insults or passive-aggressive Instagram posts. 2 alphas, 2 visions, and $1 billion property. They might share the same universe again, but don't expect them to ever share the same scene or the same mindset. In the world of Fast and Furious, there is only one driver behind the wheel, and neither is letting go. This divided the cast and the fans of Fast and Furious. The battle went to social media with tags like Team Vin and Team Rock trending every time there was any new update on Fast. Some fans appreciated that Johnson brought box office appeal and professionalism, while others thought he was disrupting the core family dynamic upon which the series is built. Tyrese was among the few cast members who came out publicly in support of Diesel, while others stayed diplomatically silent for fear of ramifications. What had started as personality clashes behind the scenes was turning into an all-out franchise identity crisis, with audiences picking sides. In this world of Fast and Furious, loyalty is the currency, but the power is the engine. And for Vin Diesel, it is not only about creative vision in maintaining control over the franchise, but also about protecting a legacy he considers his own. From past friends to potential co-stars, whoever stood between him and that control, intentionally or otherwise, has been shoved aside, sidelined, or never even allowed through the door. The deeper you dig, the clearer it becomes. This is not only the race that is happening on screen, it's going on behind the scenes. And Diesel has no intention of relinquishing the driver's seat. The Fast franchise is embraced with the word family at its heart. But the meaning morphed from one that was once innocuous and almost naive to one that became darker and more complicated. Loyalty is not paid back, and misunderstandings are not easily contrived into forgiveness. Even the closest of ties leave behind shadows, silences, and scars. Paul Walker presumably left one with Diesel, be it Momoa, Johnson, Reeves, Tyrese, or the Walkers. The trend is hard to miss. So, which of these feuds surprised you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We're ready for all the takes. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed the ride, subscribe for more deep dives into Hollywood's biggest behind-the-scenes battles, and hit the bell so you never miss the drama. And if you think this video was intense, wait until you see what's coming next. Click on the video on your screen now. You won't believe who's really running the show.